Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Creativity. Naven here. I'm so glad you're joining us this evening or wherever you're at in the world, coming to us from, whatever time of the day it is there. We welcome you aboard. And just to let you know, the live chat is up. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them there. And also below the video, you can look for contact information. So let's get started because I know today's guest is going to be a real treat, and I'm so excited to have her. So I want to welcome Nicole Romero to Soul Creativity. Welcome, Nicole, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I know we have a good conversation um, lined up this evening, and you've had a lot of things going on. You've been making changes. You just updated your website. And you have some new programs coming up and some really great thoughts. Your website is, which the address for your website is below the video if anyone's looking for it. Nicole has some really great things going on, and we're going to talk to her about some of those ideas this evening. So, welcome, Nicole, and welcome everyone listening in. So, Nicole, one of the first things that is of interest to me, and I know is also to you, and I want to talk about it, is the importance of listening to that inner voice, which can be so difficult even when we practice it all the time, and also to allow that inner voice to align to our soul creativity or the creativity of our soul. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that idea.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is a lot of us don't even know that we have that inner voice until we go looking for it, right? Because our bodies and we get signs and information, but we don't know how to read that if we don't know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And once we become more aware, I think a lot of our journeys begin in self-development because we have to really dive inward in order to know who we are and what we need in our life and what we're meant to do. So once we become more aware that that inner voice is there, then we can really start listening and learning. We kind of have to get to know ourselves from the inside out. And in order to really align to what our creative calling is or what our path is meant to be, we have to take the steps required to do the work that helps us get to know that part of ourselves.
That's so true. And I think, it takes probably for most of us some practice to hear the inner voice and then also to trust it because, we're not taught that, or most of us aren't taught that early on.
Right.
We take in all the information outside of us and then we judge our identity or what's right for us, what we should be doing based on that outside information coming into us. And so I think that's really important. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, we hear a lot about our soul purpose today. And I always align that with our creativity because I think our creativity is that divine, sort of sacred part of us. And with creativity having a broad definition.
Right.
And so I think that's like where our passion lies. And so I think that's so important because the two are connected, hearing the inner voice and then aligning it with that creativity.
Totally.
It's so important. And so part of that, going along with that, I think, is once you get into that, I like to call it like, setting your wild spirit free. It's what you would say, maybe unleashing or letting your creativity run free. And I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit and maybe then in ways in which we can practice doing that.
Yeah, well, and just to say, it's always a challenge and a journey with ourselves. Like you said, we all get stuck and we're always in evolution. So I still struggle with listening to my inner voice and trusting that inner voice because we've been so conditioned, against that kind of trust in ourselves, right? And I think I just heard today, actually, Joe Dispenza had I saw it probably on Instagram, but he had said 90%, I think, of by the time we're 35 is all perceptions and things that are imposed on us, and we don't realize that. So, so yes, this is something I still struggle with too. So I just want to put that out there. This is not like, this is always an ongoing journey. And I think that part of that suppression and things that society places on us is part of why we have to learn to let, speaking of our creativity, setting that free, and not letting ourselves be held down by what everyone else is telling us that we need to do, and looking inward for our own satisfaction and our own what is going to bring us joy, what is going to bring meaning to our journey of purpose, and not just learning to tune out the noise, really, because there's just so much coming from everywhere. We have stuff from our family, we have stuff from school, from corporate. That was a big one for me, that we get stuck in what we think things are supposed to look like, that we don't ever pause to think maybe it's not what it needs to look like, or we don't need to be in a certain field to be successful. We don't need to be in a certain major to it's really comes down to a measure of how we deem success. What do we consider success? And when we can find that place of peace and joy, then we can really unbridle that creativity and let it go, and realize that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, and it doesn't matter what everyone else says we need to be doing, because we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be, because we know it from our gut instinct. So,
right. Yeah, that's so important, because I think, it's been culturally thought of that the more noticed you are, or celebrity is the way to go, like that's success. Yeah. And we weren't taught to actually kind of honor some of the things that actually make us feel better, because they maybe weren't, we were always striving, like you were talking about being in the corporate world, then you need the best title.
Yeah.
Or if you're in another field, it's, there's a lot of judgment that goes with that. But I think when you get into that inner voice, that helps you to start moving away from that and feeling a little more secure.
Yes.
When you hear it and honor it.
Yeah, and you asked, I just remember I didn't expand on that. You asked what kind of tools and things I use to dive into that. And one of the reasons I partner with horses is because horses are so good at reflecting all this stuff that's going on inside that we can't see. So a lot of times we have to look outside ourselves in order to go inward, because we need a little help, and that's okay, right? We need help to dive in. So it really, for me, my journey began on trying to I knew I had to make a change. And for me, it started with like trying to look into how I could have better money habits, which moved down the road to a whole self-development and spiritual journey. So it's all about taking the one step. So if we're feeling a nudge in some direction, maybe it's just a matter of we begin researching that, or if we're feeling something we're really battling against, maybe it's looking at how we can make that part of our lives easier. And a lot of it is about getting quiet, which is one of the hardest things, because we have to be able to sit with ourselves in order to hear ourselves. And so, meditation is a big thing for me, and guided meditations, because my mind is always running. So guided meditations are good for me because they help keep me kind of focused on ongoing in. Journaling is a huge, huge thing for me. I love writing, and I'm sure that's a big one for you, because it's like when you're writing, you can just get out everything you need to get out. And even my podcast that I have, like getting to do that and hear my own things that come out, and hearing your voice, getting more comfortable with your voice, I think is actually a really kind of therapeutic thing, because a lot of us hate hearing ourselves and seeing ourselves. And so just getting to know that voice and hearing ourselves when different things come up, hearing ourselves, the differences in our voice tones when, we are in our true selves and when we're just talking out of our head. So those are just a few of the things. You know, I've got a whole lot of things that I go into. Painting's a good one.
Yeah.
Um,
I think also probably with you, because of the horses, but a big one for me is being out in nature is really helpful.
Absolutely.
And being around the horses too, you know, there's that almost meditative
Completely.
feeling, you
Mm-hmm.
know, being around horses and I'm sure other pets.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, anything in the natural world, I think, also helps us get, you know, at least be open to hearing that voice within, and you know, gives you
Absolutely.
that time and space for it.
Absolutely.
Nicole, this is on your website, but I just love this little story that you have on your website about one of the things that made you consider making a change, and it was your daughter
Yes.
when she was a baby. And I really like this story, and I think it's a good reminder of how much we lose of like playfulness and joy as we get older and are, you know, in the regular world. And I just wonder if you would share that story with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, it really was, you know, when you think about those moments and there's like, oh, that one moment that changed things, this was one of those. And I really love it because I like people to know things don't always have to come out of really bad moments. It can
Mhm.
come from a moment of joy too. But yeah, I was alone with my baby. She was just under 3 months old. And we were in a bookstore, and my husband had walked away. It was just me and her, and she was sleeping. And she just started laughing like she wasn't even meant to be laughing like that at that age. And I did not hear her laugh like that again, maybe ever, really. I mean, it was filled with so much purity and joy. I was like, and I laughed and in with her, and in that moment I was like, I have not felt this and I have not laughed like this, and I don't even know how long. And it was such a wake-up call for me because I'm like, what am I missing? You know, like where did I get off that I didn't allow myself to receive this kind of joy anymore? And I said, in that moment, I said, something has to change. I said, I can't be an example to my children. I can't be an example to other people if I'm not living it, my own dreams. If I'm not living from that state, how can I tell them to do the same? So it was a massive moment. That was a game changer. And everything from that point on, I started searching and working on myself. So, I had had a very dark period up to that. So I'm not going to say there weren't seeds planted during a dark time,
Mhm.
but it was the need for that joy that took me and propelled me forward.
And I think that, you know, going back to the inner voice, but, you know, your daughter's joy and laughter kind of setting you on that path to start exploring, I think that takes us, you know, back to our authenticity. And I think a lot of times when we start doing that, we trace back to things in our childhood
Yes.
that made
Mm-hmm.
us either unique or were passions for us then, and they come back up. They were things that we just kind of put below the surface. And so I think when we tap into that inner voice, you know, it takes us into our personal truth and our authenticity, and then we can create from that place of authenticity.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, you know, what you have to say about that, because I think how much it benefits us personally, but you know, if you have a family, how it benefits your family.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so with the change that you made, going from a corporate setting into starting your own business, and you know, taking the uh, risk, and but trusting, you know, trusting that voice, trusting your own authenticity. um, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and how that benefits us and others.
Yeah, totally. And I do think that we need to go. I think childhood is very often, I won't say for everybody, but very often that is the place that we go back and find that authenticity in our roots, because it was before we worried about too much, right? We didn't worry about what anyone else thought, or we're just having fun. And so when we're in that state, we can really be in our true selves, and we know what makes us happy, we know what makes us sad, and we can just, leave out what doesn't serve us and move forward. So I didn't, it was a big risk for me, thinking about leaving a well-paying job, a job I thought I should be happy with. And, we upped and moved, and thank God I have a very supportive family, very supportive husband and family, that we were able to move nearby to get that kind of support. Because it took me about another 2 years to decide I was leaving that job. And in that time, it was just all about little steps. And I could see, as I was changing, I could see the benefit of the people around me. I could see the difference it was having on my husband, on my kids. I mean, albeit subtle, and I can see it even better looking back now. But when you change your own energy, it really does change everything. It's like you start inside and you start seeing things that you have no control over, really, start to evolve and reflect back to you what you're putting out. And even in the workplace, things, I won't say it wasn't still challenging, but I started moving around people with a higher vibration, you could say, people that were reflecting more of that positivity back instead of all the negative places I had been setting in for so long. And so, yeah, I think once we get aligned to that part of ourselves, that we really start seeing everything in the world around us change. And we feel freer then at that point to really be ourselves and to really do, things that maybe we were afraid to do before, or, we're freer to be ourselves, basically.
And I think about childhood, if children have time alone, they generally, do something very creative.
Yeah.
Especially if they're outside, or they're, they have access to art supplies or something like that, they just naturally create. And when they're in that state, they're creating not by trying to, create a masterpiece. They're just expressing their self, and letting their self just drift into that zone of creativity, where you just lose time. And, that's one of the things that's exciting about being around children, and it's a good reminder for us to, spend time also doing the same thing. Both you and I, of course, are interested in writing, interested in story, and I'm thinking about story and also circumstance. And so you were talking about, your daughter's laughter, being a moment of joy, and how that opened you up. And it doesn't always have to be some negative thing. I mean, a lot of times it might be, but I think that's really important to point out. If you stay open, and stay aware, you don't always have to, it can come from somewhere that you don't expect it to come from. And so I'm thinking about stories, because we learn our stories early. We learn our identities, we learn our place in the family, we learn our family history, our community, and then there's stories that come at us, like, depending on your station in life or your gender, whatever, there are certain stories that come at you from a collective viewpoint. And so those stories can really affect us. And I think, you were talking about how your mind is always going. It's, playing that loop. And you were talking about Dr. Dispenza. And I know how he talks about how you have to rewire, the brain. You have to do something for a certain amount of time to actually get a new circuit in your brain to believe, whatever it is, believe you're creative, believe you're worthy, or whatever whatever story that limits you.
Right.
You have to rewire your brain. And so I wonder how you think, because I work with this, the stories, of course, that limit us are the ones that we want to deal with, to rewrite. And so they can be coming from internal or external.
Mm-hmm.
They can, a good story can motivate us and help us believe we can do something. And then a limiting or negative story, puts us in that place of, I can't, I don't know how, and all the negative. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, when you're working on that yourself or working with a client, how what perspective do you take on that?
So I'm a big fantasy person, and I love the whole idea of the hero's journey. And so I was always often my escape was into fantasy novels and these big hero arcs. And then one day, as I was in the middle of all this work, I'm like, what is preventing me from having my own hero's journey? Because why can't we rewrite our life? We're reading these stories, we're like, oh, I wish, this was my circumstance, or I wish I was like this character. And it's like, what's preventing me from doing that? If I want to be that, if I want to do this, why can't I write, let's insert my own plot twist here and make a change and start rewriting my life story in a way where I'm the hero. We have to step up and become the hero of our own story because no one else is going to do it for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the biggest perspective shift for me, because we spend so much time telling stories in our heads about things that oftentimes aren't even happening. We'll dwell on things and we'll tell ourselves like, the what ifs, or what if I had done this different, or thinking future, what, this person's going to react this way, as if we know, and we don't. Like, we just build these stories around. And so if we spend that same kind of energy putting it into the story we want to create and the world we want to build around us, then we're going to end up with a way more positive, mindset. And the things that we're striving for are going to start showing up in front of us. And not to say it's going to look exactly like, a fantasy story, but it can feel like a fantasy, because it really comes down to how we feel within our story, because we all kind of want, for me, I want a sense of peace and freedom and joy, and, to feel in that moment. So what in this life is going to bring that for me? And then we sort of go from there in how we can build the world around that, how we can write our story to strive toward that. And it really comes down to us just answering that call, just like the hero has to. We have to step up and answer the call of what our life's journey is meant to be.
And it made me think of what you were talking about earlier, with the inner voice and everything. You get that first inkling of you want change, you're going to answer this call. Generally we follow the pattern, we're kind of afraid to answer it. And then we, accept the journey, and how we often bring something back, that's the transformation that, we're kind of a new person when we come back. And, what do you think about like that rewriting or taking that journey that serves us to fuel the journey to our sacred creativity?
I think that we're all, we are all creative souls. We all have creative abilities. Some of us use them in career, some of us use them in hobby. And I think that we can use these things every day. And so when we're on that inner journey, I think that those kind of tools that we naturally have are going to start coming into play. And I also think, our creativity, I think people put kind of a standard around creativity, like certain things make people think people are creative.
Yeah.
But creativity takes all forms, right? Some of us are creative thinkers. Some of us are, creative in the way that we manage our lives. Some of us are creative very visually. But there's a multitude of things. And I think that the way that we discover those skills is to really, again, to dive inward and to look at this inner journey, because we have to get to know ourselves. So where are our gifts hiding? What do we need to uncover? And the more that we uncover, the more we're going to find we had, creative skills we didn't even know we had. And we might find that we enjoy being creative in a different way. I went to school for basically to create experiences around story, and now that looks, I used to be in theme parks and letting people step into other stories. And now I'm creating experiences where people can come in and help transform their own lives. But it's still, it looks different, but it's making the impact, and it's aligned to my soul and aligned to my sacred creativity and the way that looks. And so I think it's a lot about having permission, giving ourselves permission to know that it's okay if our creativity looks different than someone else thinks it needs to look.
Right. I can see why you went with the theme park now that you mentioned the fantasy.
Yeah.
That's a good way to express that. Of course, people didn't used to talk about self-care, so much in the way that we do nowadays. And so I think when we go through that whole thing, the inner voice aligning with our authenticity and then creating from, our passions or, our deepest truth, that is a way to practice self-care.
Yeah.
And, to show respect for your creativity and for yourself. And I'm wondering, what you think about that, and if you have any, particular way that you kind of honor that and, recognize it as a self-care.
Yeah, I completely think it's a self-care. It's also, creativity is a muscle. And just like anything, we want to make sure that we're giving it the attention it needs. And so oftentimes when we're not giving ourselves, certain people, I'm one of them. Sometimes we need space. Sometimes we need rest. Sometimes we need, to go on an adventure. And so creativity, it's like, we need to be able to give ourselves the room to explore creatively. And I think that when we do things, when we try new creative skills, whether you're trying painting or you're trying journaling, or just something completely different, I think it can help us with those moments of what we were talking about, rewiring our brain, because it opens up new space that we haven't explored before. And so I think that creativity can really be a way to unpack things. It can be a way to just make us look at things in a different perspective, because creativity is basically the expression of our soul. And if we suppress that and we don't try to get any of that out, then it's just going to stay buried. And so the more that we can play and the more we can experiment and do different things and try different things in a creative capacity, and whatever that looks like for you, it's the more that we're going to unpack our authentic selves and our true self and our true gifts and the things that we really feel that we are meant to share and offer. And I think that it's just a necessary tool for all of us, because it's within all of us.
I have one more topic I'd like to get into, and maybe we can wrap it up with this, Nicole, is, being a writer and also working with transformation, personal, or guiding someone else, is being in that state of wonder and curiosity, and how important, because as you mentioned before, just listening to the inner voice doesn't mean everything is going to, flow along
Right.
very smoothly, like all the time. I mean, there's still going to be life challenges, and there are even glitches along the way with, following your own path. And so I'm wondering, how you feel about, if we can stay in that state, how it helps us through, and instead of stopping us in our tracks, because it's really easy to even start down the path, maybe have some good results, but then just say, this isn't working,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
getting anywhere. I don't know where I'm going. And then you just stop and
Right.
Go back to familiar territory.
Yes. And it is so hard, because we are always going to come up against something, and we're not always going to be in that state of high. We'll have like a few weeks where everything just seems to be going right and the universe is laying everything out for us. And then all of a sudden you just hit a wall and you're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't meant to be, or maybe I'm meant to just go back to my job or not pursue this. And it's really easy to give up when we run into that stuff because we were in such a state of flow. And so when it gets clogged up, it's like, oh, you know, what does this mean for me? But the truth is like the reality of life, we're always going to have challenges. And what it comes down to is how we respond to those. And so we have to be able to set with the bad that comes along and then figure out how to respond to that in a way that's still in alignment with our souls and with our path. Because I think that, you know, like you said, being in a state of wonderment or curiosity, it's the state we have to come back to. So we can't always be staying there. We're going to get knocked off. So it's about responding in a way that can get us back to that place. And when we can shift, you know, if we get stuck in one place, it's like, how can we shift that will help us keep moving forward? You know, what can I can control in this situation? Because we don't have control of all of our exterior circumstances. But if you can control yourself to take one step in another direction, or, you know, look for solutions in places you wouldn't expect, or ask for help, you know, that's why it's so important to have our whole support community in our web. It's to have other people lean into. I can't even tell you how important my mentors, my friends, all the people that I have met on this journey that have been, you know, connected to me, that have been brought to me, you know, that have been dropped in my path, because we're, you know, you get connected to like-minded people when you're on this journey. And when you can look to those people to help you through these moments, when you get down, you're going to find solutions in ways you just never even imagined. So I really think having a support group is massively important in cases of where you're going to hit your lows, because you know, you need people that have, even if they're not on the exact same path, they're on a similar path, they're in a like-minded state of mind, and they can help you, pull you out of that.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. That's really well said, Nicole. And I think, you know, like anything, you're in flow with curiosity and wonder, you know, and it can help you see a bigger picture when you need to. And also make you recognize those places that were the paths you didn't think you were going to go down. You know? So,
yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So I think we're just about out of time. If you want to, your website is listed under the video, but if you want to mention it so that people can look you up if they want to.
Yeah, it's NicoleRomeroCreative.com, and you can pretty much get to anything of mine on there. I have a podcast and a Facebook group, and there's links to everything on there. So that's pretty much the only place you need to go. But I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and yeah, I'd love to connect.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nicole. This was a really good talk, and maybe we can have you back sometime and continue and see where you're moving along your path and what new things you have coming up. So I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank everyone who listened in today or is listening in later. And always feel free to reach out. I love your comments, and if you have any comments for Nicole, we'll make sure she gets them. So thank you, Nicole, and thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much, Nathan.